to Behind the Story with Naomi and Lisa, where we discover the stories behind the story. My name's Lisa Renee from the Collaborative Press, and I'm a contemporary romance author of the Single Again series.
And I'm Naomi Craig, author of historical fiction, Rahab's Courage. Before we begin, last episode we had a draw for one of Carolyn Miller's book, your book of your choice. So we have our lucky winner was randomly selected by King Sumo, and our winner is Lisa?
Phoebe. So Caroline has your email address. She'll contact you. You can select any ebook from her selection, contemporary or her Regency, and she'll send you a link so you can get hold of that. So congratulations. And we have giveaways every time, so we will have something special for you. We'll mention a little bit later today. Before we introduce today's guest, we were just going to catch up with what Naomi and I are up to. Naomi, what are you writing or what are you editing at the moment?
Right now, hopefully by the time it airs, it'll be in your hands. I am madly working to finish up, at least making my manuscript legible for my critique group of Ezekiel and his wife. So hopefully by the 1st, you will have that ready to go. How about you? What are you working on? I know you were on a bit of a vacation there.
Yeah, having some time off with the kids. So got everything handed in before Christmas. And then this month I've just been plodding away. So I've plotted out the first island book that I'm going to be doing, Independence Island, which will be coming up. Chautona is my lead author, and she's going to mentor me, I'm sure, make sure I'm doing a good job. So I submitted my plot to her, and then I also submitted a plot to another group, some Australian authors. We're doing a series which will be set in America, and we'll find out more about that. But that's coming in 2023, so we'll find out more about that down the track. Okay, so today our special guest is prolific author and insatiable reader, Chautona Havig, with hundreds of books in progress and over 80 published. Chautona writes about fictional people who have real problems, weaknesses, and triumphs. Through their stories, she attempts to share the hope that is within her. In other words, she offers Christian fiction without pretense or apology, lived, not preached. She uses story to connect you with the master storyteller. Chautona, thanks for joining us on Behind the Story.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be a whole lot of fun. And especially since we've got like 2 different days going on here, which I think is totally cool.
Chautona, for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about how long you've been writing and what you write and sort of stuff like that.
Well, I started sometime around 2000 when I kept getting these comments about how did I manage with all those kids. And so I wrote my frustrations into a manuscript because author. And it just kind of went from there. I just kept writing and, between all the photosynthesis and the polygons and the prepositions, I would, pound a few words out until the next kid came over and asked a question. And so it was a lot harder to get stuff done back then. And yet, on the other hand, in some ways it was easier because there was no marketing, there was no interacting. I was just me holed up in my own little world, But I write, any romance author would not claim me because I don't write straight up romance. If it happens to be a part of the story because it's natural, then I do it. But I rarely just make that the point of the story. But it's the best category for a lot of what I do, but I'm pretty multi-genre. I write everything. The only thing I haven't done yet is biblical fiction. I think we're going to leave it to the master here, and I'm just going to leave that aside. But you know what? Every time I say that, then I do something else. I even came up with Amish that I'm going to do. It's not any Amish like anybody else has ever seen, but hey, only me. I have to come up with this bizarre stuff. So, maybe someday I'll do biblical, but I really don't think so.
Sounds like a lot of work to me. But I would like to do biblical one day. So what year did you start writing? Because it's 80 books.
It was sometime around 2000. It was when sometime in the year after my 8th child was born. I kept getting those comments, and so I just started writing my frustration. So it started then. I didn't start publishing until around, I think it was 2009-ish,
Oh, wow.
Miss.
Okay.
And then everything really kicked off in 2012. I went from nobody knowing who I was to getting fan mail. That was really weird.
Well, that's awesome.
So before we get going, I took the liberty of asking some of your readers what they wanted to know. And I have to say it was very spirited conversation. But tell us about your latest project. Tell us what's coming out next for you.
Well, the 26th of January, whenever that is in relation to today, is my most recent release. It's the second book in the first island series, the Independence Islands. And it was supposed to be, because these are supposed to be contemporary romance, and because I'm me, it turned into more romantic women's fiction because me. But it's probably one of it. I don't think it can pass up one of my other books as my favorite, but it might now be my second favorite book. It turned into something really amazing. I shouldn't say everybody, that's not true. So many people who have read it already, the advanced readers and stuff, I get these emails and they're like, I can't believe this book, this has this in it that I really needed to hear. Or, I didn't know this about me, but I saw this here. Or this is my marriage. How did you know my marriage? And I was like, okay, I didn't realize that me trying to, all it was supposed to be a twist on a trope. I was trying to do that on the rocks thing. And so so it's Booker's on the Rocks, and because their last name is Booker, shocker, right? But I kind of did that because Booker's or Booker, one of the two, is a kind of bourbon. And so I thought it would be kind of funny to have, like bourbon on the rocks, but it's Booker's because it's their last name and we're in the South. And I thought all this fun play on words that most of my readers probably wouldn't know, but it didn't matter because I knew, And so, I wanted to do a twist on that on the rocks trope. And I was like, well, what happens if a marriage is on the rocks, but nobody is having an affair? They don't argue. Everything looks great. They feel great. They're happy. But what if their marriage still is on the rocks? And so I tried to do that. It's not romance. I'm just saying. But it's a whole lot of fun, and I'm really excited about it.
Well, that sounds great. I mean, there's a lot of readers who are married. They're not looking at new romance, but they love romance. And so I think that's great. It's relevant to your readers. Is there a couple in there that's not married, or is it mainly on the couple is the married couple?
There are actually three. And I don't know if I'm going to do a lot with one of them, but you've got your primary couple. In all of these books, there's my business owner. See, these islands, they have the mobile businesses. And so there's one person that's connected to all the books, and that's Mallory. And then, so she's got kind of something coming. It's like the slowest of slow burns. You're going to see this relationship over 5 books before it's their book, And then in this one, there's this couple, but there's also, you get the spark and the hint of another couple. And Tessa, the main character in this book, kind of learns a little bit about romance from that other little side couple. So that was kind of fun.
That sounds great. It's all interesting how, series intertwine and how you plan it out. So yeah, I can't wait to read it. So another question, Sandy wants to know if you've ever considered writing nonfiction.
I actually have nonfiction in the works. I have 2 different things in the works. I have so my Past Forward series is my second most popular series, all about this isolated girl. And people were really resonated with her lifestyle. I get so many emails saying, I want to live her life. And I keep thinking, I don't think you really do. You don't want to live without electricity. You don't want to, have to milk the goat every morning. You don't. What you want is that simplicity behind it all. And so I thought it would be fun to write a book that I've titled in my head, Living Past Forward, where I can interview people, and I've done some of them already, who have these traits in some area of their life that then will turn out and become more of a, just a way that this is how one person has applied this principle of living intentionally. And so it can be relationships, or it can be in, how you decorate your home or how you feed your family or whatever. I know people that do different things. There's one friend of mine who's really amazing at being intentional with her kids. She's got a full-time job, but she is the most intentional mom with her kids I've ever seen. I want her story in there so that people can take the principle of what's going on in that book and apply it to their life. So I've got that one. And then, the word of the day, word of the year things that people do. I've started writing what I've learned in my year. So I got one that started, it's a year of focus from the first year I did it. And then I have a year of enough from last year. And then this one will be, a year of being prayerful. And so I'm going to do those eventually, but we'll see when that happens.
When you have time, for sure. So is there ever a chance that we will see the inside of Willow's journals? Melissa wants to know.
Yes. Well, they're mostly her mother's journals in the books, but there are some of hers. But yes, I'm actually going to publish Carrie's journals and Willow's journals as their own series.
And is that the Fast Forward?
Yes, that's the Fast Forward series. So in the Fast Forward series, her mother's journals are a big part of how she decides what to do and when to do and how to do it. That it's not a spoiler. That book opens when she finds her mother dead. Mm-hmm. And so her whole life starts because she's never been around people. She doesn't know how to interact with people. She doesn't know. She's just been that isolated. So she's using her mother's journals to know when to plant this and when to, and so but it's also life lessons and things. And so I'm going to tell their story from before that opening through the mother's journals.
Awesome. Great. And we got a question from Andrea. She wants to know when the next Legends book is coming.
I know which Andrea that is, because if I sneeze, she's like, oh, were you working on Legends? Well, I actually pulled out Legends last year, and then because COVID, it got put back on the shelf. But so it should, I really hope it should come back out and be done, the next book be done by the end of 2021. This is the goal. Let's hope the goal is accomplished. They've been waiting a long time for book 2.
Right. Okay. So how many series do you have out? Do you know?
I'm going to say a minimum of 8.
Right. Cool.
Minimum.
Okay. So Rita asked a question that Naomi and I were asking you before. What was the first thing you wrote and how did you get started?
So the first thing I wrote was, like I said, it wasn't just Ready or Not. It was the whole Aggie series. So when I started writing that book after getting that question of, how do you do it with all those kids? And me going, I'll show you. I wrote about 60,000 words. And that 60,000 words actually became a 2.5 series book. 2.5 book series at that point. Went through went through about half of the third book. But each of those books ended up to be about 120,000 words. So obviously I did a lot of fleshing out. And so, but it just started off with that. And then I was, they read like a laundry list. I'm telling you, it was really bad. But when I got, once I got there, I just kind of couldn't stop. And in the middle of that, I wrote another book, which became the first book that came out. And then I wrote like 3 or 4 more. And so in the middle of all of this, I got all these other projects going on. And some of the ones that are finished, but not edited and not published are still from back then. So it's kind of like the one that came out last year, Volition. That one had been written way back then and had been sitting there for a decade, just waiting for... It was really bad. And then my son says, I need a project. And I'm like, okay, I got this book. I'll edit it. So yeah, I've got a backlog of things that just haven't been edited yet too. So it's been a long process.
That's amazing. So Nancy wants to know, how much research do you have to do? Obviously, if you're doing historical, it's going to be a little bit more, but what does your research look like before you start writing?
So a lot of what I'll do is I'm gonna go with my Deepest Roots of the Heart, because that one I know approximately how many hours I started with on that one. That one I read everything I could read about Napa Valley, about travel from Texas to California during that time period that I had them do it. You couldn't go overland. The Indians would prevent you. So you actually had to go down from the East Coast down around Cape Horn. No, that's Africa. Cape something down at the bottom of South America. Brain just died, and then back up to California. That was the only way to get there because they had blocked the routes. So it was a long, arduous, horrible journey. And so by the time I got done just writing that one book, I had done over 100 hours of research, not including my trip to Napa, where I drove all over the place, saw everything that I had put in the book, went to the museum, I read all the curator stuff. The Napa Museum was amazing. They were actually closed that day, but they let me in because they were changing displays. They let me in, they talked to me, they gave me everything I needed. It was unbelievable. Kudos to those guys. But so that book, just that alone, was forever. But when you're writing a lot of stuff, you just don't know until you're in the middle of it. And so I do a lot of stuff. I'd say a minimum of 20 to 30 hours of reading something. Sometimes even like the Vintage Wren books. It's a serial novel that people get every other week free. That requires a lot of research because I have to figure out what new green thing she's going to come up with next and how that's going to work and where it fails. So there's a lot there. But even as you're writing, I'll see this word and I'm like, did that word exist? Was it in use in 1902? And if it wasn't, I can't use it. And let me tell you, there's a lot of, you're typing, stop, go look it up, come back and forget the rabbit trails of, oh, but look at that word. And where did that, yeah, it's bad. It's bad. But so it's a lot of work up front, but then there's a lot of research in the middle that I can't even count because I don't know.
Wow. Okay. So are you a plotter or a pantser? That's a question from Sarah Beth Williams.
Both. It depends on the book, and it depends on if I have a deadline or if I'm just getting to write because I want to write. Or if you consider making a literally 7-point outline where I have one sentence for each point, plotting or not. Because I do that, I make sure that I have a hook, an inciting event, a midpoint, conflict resolution, and a couple of twists. I make sure I've got those beats so that I know what I'm working toward. But then there's also, I plot audibly in the car on my trips. Like Sandy Barella, I go visit her. She's 2.5 hours on a good day with no traffic. And she lives down in the, yeah, there's going to be traffic except at 2. Last time, 2 in the morning, I was coming home and I was stuck for 40 minutes at 2 in the morning on the freeway, can't move, parked. So it doesn't matter what time of day, but so I will talk on my voice recorder and I will plot out everything. And then a lot of times I will delete that and I will do the same thing again with the same book on the way home, 2.5, 3 hours. And by the time I'm home, I've got that book planned out. And so if I need to write it fast, all I got to do is type up those notes and go. I can just write the book. But if I don't need it, I still have all those ideas that I brainstormed and churned, and then I can just sit down and write them.
I'm sure after as many books you've written, you've sort of got the templates in your head anyway, and you've got the, like you're saying, midpoint, and a lot of writers just write naturally like that anyway. Sarah also asks, why have you chosen such an unconventional writing style? So do you have an unconventional writing style?
I guess I do.
According to her.
Because it's the only way I know how to write. Sorry, I don't know what that means. I write like I talk or like I think the character would talk.
Right. Mm-hmm. And like you're saying, you're probably a bit more on the side of women's fiction as well, with romance threads sort of thing.
So Jennifer wants to know, kind of going right along with that, where do you get your ideas and how are you able to successfully write in so many genres, and which do you feel most at home in?
Well, ideas come from pretty much everywhere. So I have to tell a short little story. My book, Random Acts of Kindness, came about because I was ticked. I was sitting at a table at Denny's and I was pounding away and my friend left, and this guy that used to sit across from me every week, he came over, he plopped down and he started talking. And I'm like, here we go. Because this guy can talk and make me look like I never say a word. I'm just saying, He's impressive. And this time he was discussing the urinary habits of animals and how long it takes to empty their bladders. And at the top of his very sonorous voice in a restaurant, no less, just saying. And it was this, I know all about the habits of rabbits and cats and elephants and everything. And just so you know, in case you didn't and you really wanted to, all animals take about the same amount of time to empty their bladder. Fascinating. Whoop-de-doodles. But it was 20 minutes of him telling me about this. And then 40 minutes of him reading me the scientific journal on it. I am not kidding you. I was so mad. I went home and I woke up my husband and I'm like, I won't say his name, is going to be single for the rest of his life. I was just so mad. And I was like, this has to be a book. So I wrote the book and it came out in one of the Crossroads collections. And then just before the book released and I had to do blog posts about it and I didn't want him to find them and feel bad, so I was going to try to figure out how I'm going to tell this, he died. And so I felt really bad because there was a little bit of relief. Isn't that terrible? There's a little bit of relief that maybe, I won't offend him with my story about his story, but yeah, I actually put that in a book and it was a thing. And it was just, what can I say? Yeah. Because whatever, but those kinds of things, I turn them into stories and they become characters and they become very real to me. The genre thing is very different because I don't set out to write in a genre usually. I have this story idea and the story determines the genre. I mean, obviously, if this is going to take place in 1800, well, then it's going to be historical. If that's the best time period to put this scenario in, it's going to be historical. But if there's a kind of a suspenseful element, then it's going to be historical suspense. It's just what it is. If the story requires suspense, it's suspense. If it requires romance, it's going to be romance. And the stories determine, basically, is what I'm going to say over and over in a million ways. And you don't need me to do that.
Mm-hmm. And you're finding your readers just happy to go into historical, go into women's fiction, romance?
Everybody says if you read all the advice about what to do and how to do it, they will say pick a genre and stick to it, which of course I did not do. I just wrote. And I would say that I would never recommend doing things my way if you have to make a living at it to support a family. It has worked for me. It's worked really well. And my readers follow me from book to book to book, and very few have trouble with, there's some people that never ever read suspense or mystery. They just don't ever want to read that. So they won't read those, but they'll read all the other ones. And then there's some other things like that. But most of the people just follow me with them and they don't seem to care. But I don't know how that would work for everyone. Not that I'm special, I'm just saying, but I wouldn't recommend it only because I can't guarantee it could be replicated.
Right.
I mean, fortunately, I've done really well, but
yep,
I don't know.
Great. Okay. Sandy asks, do you listen to music while you're writing? What type of music, if you do listen to it?
Okay, I do two different things. It depends on if I'm just writing and I don't have this like heavy duty deadline, or if I have a heavy duty deadline. So if I'm just writing, I need something to train my brain that, you're not supposed to go off on rabbit trails right now. You're supposed to be working. So I will go on to YouTube, and there's these ASMR weekly steady video sound effects things. And, please don't crucify me, but I go to the Harry Potter ones because there's a lot of paper in them. So you got paper rustling, and you've got, just like the sounds of owls sometimes. And it's just a really soothing way to work. Sometimes fire crackling. It's perfect for me. And so I will have those playing in the background and I just type. But if I need to really, really focus, I have trained my brain that if I'm at focusatwill.com and I have my acoustical music going, this is crunch time. And I'll have that going, and every 20 minutes it dings at me. I get up, I walk around, decide what I'm going to write next. While I'm walking around, I sit down and I just go like crazy again. And so I listen to music, but I don't listen to the kind of music that most people do.
So this is where the feisty part came in. That's really helpful though, because Lisa and I both do 25-minute sprints too, but it's really easy to get on rabbit trails for sure. I'm sure I need to know what's happening on social media right now. You know, it's like, it's
The second.
toss the phone on the other side of the room. Yeah. So, Sandy asked about more marriage of convictions, and this led to a conversation about TPing a house. It led to tractor painting and square dancing with tractors and disowning of best friends. So can you please tell us about why this provoked such a dramatic response?
Okay, so Sandy is why this series exists. I wrote 2 different books way back in the day. Those books I was talking about, I wrote them way back in the day, and they were very different stories. And I had decided to combine them into one book. And then I could because I was like, oh, this is how because I didn't know how to finish Blessing Bentley, which I don't even remember what the title had been. It had been a different title. But actually, I think it was Marriage of Conviction. Now I know. Anywho, so with that one, I was going to bring in basically the second book, and I was just going to combine it. It was going to be great. But she wanted me to put Bentley with Tate, and that's not how that was supposed to work. I knew that was the wrong solution. That was the easy solution. We don't want the easy solution. And so I was like, no, I think I want, and she's like, well, they need to be 2 separate books then. And I didn't like it, but I decided she was right on that point only. And so then while we were talking about it, I was like, okay, I don't like a 2-book series. I prefer 3. A trilogy is better. 2 books, not so much. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do a 3rd book. I always planned to tell this other story from my 31 Kisses book. There's a brother in there. I always planned to tell his story, and I had always planned to make it him marrying someone he didn't really know as a way to protect her. And so I was like, I can tweak that a little bit and put it in this series. Okay, got it. 3 books, done. Every single time anything comes up about anything, Sandy's like, oh, that could be a marriage of conviction. Oh, if she had her way, this would be a 30-book series all by its lonesome. I'm just saying. So it has become this thing where, so help me, if I even blink about a new book, she's like, oh, is that going in there? Or, oh, you should write this for, or whatever. And so, yeah, she says it again. I'm toilet papering our house. She lives in a gated community. She's going to be in trouble. I'm just saying. Trouble.
It's good to have friends challenging you. Okay. Yeah, we've got a question here from Tiffany. Where did the idea for the Rockland Chronicles come from, and how do you integrate so many stories together?
That came from me not being willing to let things go. I'm not good at that. You know, you get this character, you love the character, but you don't want to say goodbye. So I wrote the Aggie books, and I hadn't even put them in, I hadn't ever mentioned Rockland in those books when I first wrote those Aggie books, the Ready or Not and so forth. But then I wrote another book that I did put Rockland in, and it actually became the first book that I ever published. And that one, when I got done with that, I go to write another book, and I was like, I could set that in the same place. And so I did, but they weren't really connected, and that was okay. But then I would find places where I was like, oh, but I could put this person here. That'd be fun to get to see them again. And then I wrote the mysteries, and that was in this town, so I could put this here. And the next thing I know, these people are popping up everywhere. They won't let me let them go. And it's a lot of fun, because then it's like reality. You know, you go to the big, okay, we live in the middle of nowhere. We're 90 miles from the nearest town, okay? So if people go 90 miles to go to the movies sometimes, we have a theater here, but they don't, well, before the plague, we would go, but they would go out. We have been known to drive 90 miles to go to In-N-Out Burger. Okay. It's a thing because In-N-Out, but so they would go there. And while we're in Lancaster, 90 miles away, and yes, in California, it's Lancaster, not Lancaster, but 90 miles away, we'll see people from Ridgecrest. You don't expect to do that. And it's not that big of a town. I mean, it's 100,000, 200,000. I mean, it's not like, this tiny, it's not huge, but we still, come on, who are you going to see from 25,000 people in Ridgecrest there? So I figured with this big old metropolis, surely people would have run and people now and then. So I just did it, and I'm really glad because I don't have to say goodbye anymore. It's easier to finish a book now.
Well, I have to say the books that I've read of yours have been really convicting, and they've been, rich and like real life and not just like fluff, like stuff I can apply in my marriage and in how I react to others. So I really appreciate your style of writing, whatever it's called. Whatever you want to call it.
I write what I would want to read.
Yeah.
So, and I have fluff. Don't get me wrong. 31 Kisses, you can't call that anything but fluff. But it was the only point was to get me comfortable writing those things. Yeah, it was an epic failure, but I'll just leave that to Pepper Basham and
those who are the kissing queens for sure.
Right.
So with all of your books, how many books do you put out a year? And with your crazy schedule, do you see your family? How do you make family life work?
Well, part of that I would say is my weird sleeping hours. When I came down with asthma a few years ago, they thought it was my heart. And I was literally stuck in a chair for 9 months because I couldn't walk to the bathroom without getting winded and falling apart. And it was bad. My bathroom is like 8 feet from the chair. I mean, it was just ridiculous. But when we found out what it was, by that point, my sleep schedule had been a mess and I've never gotten it back. So I sleep from about 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. Most of the people in my family are gone at that point, except for my youngest daughter now, who's, doing school during those hours, or actually now she's babysitting all day. So, I'm not missing out on them. So I'm up with them and enjoying spending time with them and do all that while they're awake. And then when they go to sleep, it's writing time. So it works out really well for my particular job. I don't know how it would work for most people, but it works for me anyway. And then I do bare minimum of 4, but as many as 8 books a year.
Wow, that's awesome. Great stuff. Okay, so you were wanting to give an ebook away. Is there a particular ebook that we've got up for grabs for our viewers?
I was thinking it would be fun just to give away, and I'll give the paperback. I'm fine, as long as it's in the United States. I just sent a very expensive box to Australia, so I want to just stick to the U.S. for the paperback, but I will send a couple of ebooks if it's an international person. But let's do Booker since it comes out sometime around when we're talking.
Yeah. So
I'm just gonna pop on here on the camera and get the picture of Booker's there.
Great. It is. Yep, the Independence Island series.
Excellent book.
Well,
I love this book.
Thank you so much for being here today and sharing with our viewers.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. You guys are a whole lot of fun.
Well, we had a great time with you, and you're always so generous in blessing others. So I hope that this blessed you in the way that you bless others. So thank you for being here. Remember to check in the links. We will have another King Sumo drawing for Bookers on the Rock. So if that sounds interesting to you, if you haven't read Chautona, check out her website. I know you can get free book when you sign up for a newsletter and lots of goodies happening on her website. Lisa and I will both have our websites and link as well. If you have enjoyed learning about Chautona and learning about authors new to you or your already favorites, subscribe to our YouTube channels for mine, Naomi C, and Lisa Renee, and the Collaborative Press. Click on the bell to be sure to be notified the next time we interview someone. And yeah, we have a great lineup coming up here in the next couple of months.
Yeah, we've got some exciting authors that we'll tell you about soon. So yeah, just check out the links. We've got the link for the King Sumo for Chautona's book, and we also got Naomi and I, we've got our Navilias when you sign up to our newsletter. So mine's the Act 1 of The Polarized Love, which is a rom-com. The first 6 chapters are rom-com, and then it blends into, a romance story. And Naomi?
In my biblical fiction about Balaam, it's called On Desolate Heights. That is free for subscription with my newsletter as well.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Behind the Story. Until next time, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. God bless. So thank you again for joining us today on Behind the Story with Naomi and Lisa. Don't forget to click on the links and subscribe to our YouTube channels, and you'll keep up to date with our author interviews. Have a great week. God bless.